They dressed her in white, as if she were a bride. Lyra stood at the edge of the forest, her bare feet numb against the frozen ground, her wrists bound with rope that bit into her skin. The gown they had forced her into was thin and useless against the winter cold, nothing more than a shroud meant to make her look pure, sacrificial, worthy of the beasts who would come to claim her. Behind her, the village elders chanted prayers to the moon. They did not look at her. None of them had looked at her since the lottery 3 days ago, when her name had been pulled from the bowl and her fate had been sealed. She was no longer Lyra, the blacksmith's daughter, the girl who had dreamed of traveling beyond the mountains. She was simply the tribute, the offering, the price her village paid each year to keep the wolves from slaughtering them all. Her mother had wept when they took her. Her father had stood silent, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. They had not tried to stop it. No one ever tried to stop it. The treaty was sacred, older than anyone could remember, and breaking it meant death for everyone. One girl in exchange for another year of peace. Lyra had always known this day might come. Every unmarried woman in the village between the ages of 16 and 25 was entered into the lottery. Every year, one name was drawn. Every year, that girl walked into the forest and never returned. No one knew what happened to the tributes. Some said the wolves devoured them. Others whispered that they were kept as slaves, or worse. The truth did not matter. What mattered was that the village survived. The chanting stopped. The head elder stepped forward, his weathered face grim. "The moon is high," he announced. "It is time." Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream, to fight, to tear free of her bonds and disappear into the darkness. But her legs would not move. Fear had turned her body to stone, and all she could do was stand there as the elder cut the rope binding her wrists and pushed her forward. "Walk until you can walk no more," he said. "They will find you." Then he turned his back on her, and the villagers retreated into the safety of their homes, and Lyra was alone. She walked. The forest swallowed her whole, dark and silent and ancient. The trees loomed overhead like gnarled giants, their bare branches clawing at the sky. Snow crunched beneath her feet, and the cold seeped into her bones, stealing her warmth one breath at a time. She walked until her legs ached, until her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might shatter, until she could not take another step. Then she collapsed in a clearing and waited to die. The wolves came with the dawn. She heard them before she saw them, the crunch of paws on snow, the low rumble of growls echoing through the trees. She forced her frozen limbs to move, pushing herself upright, and found herself surrounded. There were dozens of them, massive beasts with fur in shades of gray and black and russet, their eyes gleaming in the pale morning light. They circled her slowly, their breath misting in the air, and Lyra knew with absolute certainty that this was the end. Then the circle parted, and he stepped through. He was not a wolf. He was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with hair as black as midnight and eyes the color of molten amber. He wore leather and fur, a crown of iron resting on his brow, and he moved with the easy grace of someone who had never known fear. The wolves lowered their heads as he passed, submitting to him without question. He stopped directly in front of Lyra, looking down at her with an expression she could not read. "They sent a girl." His voice was low and rough, like gravel wrapped in velvet. "Again." Lyra lifted her chin, refusing to cower. If she was going to die, she would die with dignity. "I am the tribute," she said. Her voice cracked from the cold, but she forced the words out anyway. "Take me and leave my village in peace." Something flickered in his amber eyes. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over her frozen form, her defiant expression, the way she trembled but did not look away. Then he did something she did not expect. He removed his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders, pulling her against the warmth of his chest. "You are not a tribute," he said quietly. "You are my mate, and I am taking you home." Lyra did not understand. She stood frozen in the circle of wolves, wrapped in a cloak that smelled of pine and wood smoke, staring up at the man who had just spoken words that made no sense. Mate. The word echoed in her mind, foreign and impossible. She was a tribute, a sacrifice. She had come here to die, not to be claimed by a king. "I do not know what you mean," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I am not anyone's mate. I am the offering your kind demanded. Take what you will from me, but do not mock me with lies." Something shifted in his amber eyes. Not anger exactly. Something softer. Something that looked almost like pain. "You think I am mocking you." He said it quietly, as if the idea wounded him. "Your village has been sending tributes for generations, and not once have they told you the truth about what happens to them." Lyra's heart stuttered. "What truth?" "The tributes are not devoured. They are not enslaved." He reached out and lifted her chin with gentle fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "They are taken to my kingdom and given a choice. They can stay and build a new life among my people, or they can return home with gold and protection. Every single one of them has chosen to stay." The words hit her like a physical blow. All her life she had believed the tributes were killed. All her life she had lived in terror of the lottery, of the wolves, of this moment. And now this man, this king, was telling her it had all been a lie. "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why would our elders tell us?" "Because fear is useful." His voice hardened. "Your elders discovered long ago that the threat of death kept your people obedient. They used the tribute system to control you, to punish those who stepped out of line, to dispose of women they found inconvenient." His jaw tightened. "I have tried for years to end this practice. But every time I send word to your village, the elders intercept my messages. They prefer the old ways, the ways that give them power." Lyra's legs gave out beneath her. He caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She should have fought. She should have demanded he put her down, that he explain everything, that he prove he was not simply telling her a prettier version of the same terrible fate. But the cold had sapped her strength, and the shock had stolen her will, and all she could do was let him carry her through the forest as his wolves fell into formation around them. "My name is Kirin," he said as they walked. "I am the Alpha King of the Northern Packs, and I meant what I said earlier. You are my mate. I felt the bond the moment I saw you." "I do not feel anything," Lyra whispered. It was not entirely true. There was something stirring in her chest, something warm and insistent, but she refused to acknowledge it. She did not trust him. She did not trust anyone. "You will." He looked down at her, and his amber eyes were gentle despite the harsh lines of his face. "The bond takes time to settle, especially for humans, but it is there. I would never lie about something so sacred." They traveled for hours. The wolves ran ahead and behind, their massive bodies cutting through the snow with ease. Kiran carried her the entire way, never slowing, never tiring, his arms steady around her. By the time the trees began to thin and the first glimpse of his kingdom appeared on the horizon, Lyra had stopped shivering. His body heat had seeped into her bones, chasing away the cold that had nearly killed her. The kingdom was not what she had expected. She had imagined caves, dens, primitive shelters carved from rock and earth. Instead, she saw a city of stone and timber, sprawling across a valley ringed by mountains. Smoke rose from 1,000 chimneys. Lights glittered in windows. People moved through the streets below, some in human form, others as wolves, living side by side in a harmony she had never imagined possible. "Welcome to Valdrin," Kirin said. "Your new home." Lyra stared at the city, her mind reeling. She had been sent here to die. She had walked into the forest expecting monsters and slaughter. Instead, she had found a kingdom more beautiful than any she had ever seen, and a king who looked at her like she was precious. "I do not understand any of this," she admitted. Kieran's arms tightened around her. "You do not have to understand it yet. You only have to survive it." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, brief and impossibly tender. "And I will make sure you do." He carried her through the gates of Valdrin, and Lyra felt the last remnants of her old life crumble away behind her. The palace was warm. That was the first thing Lyra noticed when Kieran set her down in a chamber larger than her entire childhood home. Fires crackled in twin hearths on either side of the room, chasing away the cold that had settled so deep in her bones she thought it might never leave. Thick furs covered the floor, soft against her frozen feet. The bed was enormous, piled high with blankets and pillows, and for a moment all she could do was stare at it. "These will be your rooms," Kieran said, "at least until you are comfortable enough to share mine." Lyra turned to face him, her cheeks flushing despite herself. "You assume I will want to share yours." "I assume nothing." His amber eyes held hers, steady and patient. "I told you before, everything here is your choice. If you wish to return to your village tomorrow, I will escort you there myself. If you wish to stay but never speak to me again, I will honor that. The bond does not give me ownership of you. It only tells me that you are the one my soul was made to find." She did not know what to say to that. No one had ever spoken to her with such earnestness, such raw sincerity. In her village, women were traded like goods, married off to whoever offered the best price. The idea that a king would give her choices was almost more shocking than the revelation about the tributes. A knock at the door interrupted the silence. Servants entered bearing trays of food, pitchers of warm water, and stacks of clothing in fabrics finer than anything Lyra had ever touched. They moved with quiet efficiency, never meeting her eyes, and she realized with a start that they were afraid of her. Or perhaps afraid for her, unsure what this new tribute might mean for their king. When they had gone, Kieran gestured to the food. "Eat, bathe, rest. I will return this evening to check on you, but only if you wish it. And if I do not wish it, then I will stay away." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "I know you have no reason to trust me, Lyra. I know everything you have been taught tells you I am a monster, but I am asking you to give me a chance to prove otherwise." He left before she could respond. Lyra ate until her stomach ached, devouring food richer than anything she had tasted in her life. She bathed in water so warm it made her skin tingle, scrubbing away the dirt and fear of the past 3 days. She dressed in a gown of soft blue wool that fit her perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. And then she sat by the fire and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She was still sitting there when evening came. True to his word, Kieran knocked before entering. He waited in the doorway until she nodded, then crossed the room and settled into the chair across from her. He had changed into simpler clothing, a loose tunic and leather trousers, and without his crown, he looked almost approachable, almost human. "You did not run," he observed. "Where would I go?" Lyra drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. "Back to the village that sent me to die? Back to the elders who lied to me my entire life?" Something dark flickered in Kieran's eyes. "They will answer for what they have done. I swear it." "Why do you care?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You are a king. I am a peasant girl from a village that has been feeding your people tributes for generations. Why does any of this matter to you?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "Because I was born from a tribute." Lyra's breath caught. My mother was sent to the forest when she was 17, he continued. She expected to die just as you did. Instead, my father found her and recognized her as his mate. He brought her here, loved her, made her his queen. His jaw tightened. She never forgot where she came from. She never stopped fighting to change the system that had nearly destroyed her. When she died, I swore I would finish what she started. Lyra stared at him, seeing him with new eyes. Not just a king, not just an alpha, a son carrying his mother's legacy, fighting a battle that had begun before he was born. I am sorry, she said softly, about your mother. She would have liked you. A faint smile crossed his face. She always said the best queens were the ones who refused to bow. Lyra felt something shift in her chest. That warm, insistent feeling she had been trying to ignore grew stronger, tugging at her heart like a thread connecting her to the man across from her. She still did not trust him completely. But for the first time since she had walked into the forest, she thought maybe she could learn to. The days that followed were unlike anything Lyra had ever experienced. She had expected to be confined to her chambers, watched and guarded like the prisoner she still half believed she was. Instead, Kieran gave her free reign of the entire palace. She could go anywhere, speak to anyone, explore every corner of the sprawling stone fortress that had become her unexpected home. The only thing he asked was that she join him for dinner each evening so they could talk. So they talked. Kieran told her about his kingdom, about the wolves who had lived in these mountains for thousands of years, about the delicate balance between their wild nature and the civilization they had built. He told her about his father, a fierce alpha who had ruled with an iron fist until the day he met a trembling tribute girl and fell so completely in love that he reshaped his entire world for her. He told her about the council of elders who advised him, some loyal and some scheming, and the constant political battles he fought to keep his people safe. In return, Lyra told him about her village, about her father, the blacksmith who had taught her to shape metal before society taught her that girls were not meant for such work, about her mother, who had died of fever when Lyra was 12, leaving behind nothing but a worn shawl and a handful of memories, about the years she had spent after that, invisible and overlooked, waiting for the lottery to claim her the way it had claimed so many before. You are not invisible, Kieran said one evening. They were sitting in the palace library, surrounded by more books than Lyra had known existed in the world. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the amber light made his eyes glow like molten gold. You never were. Your village simply could not see what was right in front of them. Lyra looked down at her hands. And what do you see? Strength. He said it without hesitation. Courage. A woman who walked into a forest full of wolves expecting to die and still refused to cower. He reached across the space between them and took her hand in his. I see someone extraordinary, Lyra. Someone worth fighting for. Her heart stuttered in her chest. The bond between them pulsed with warmth, and this time she did not try to ignore it. Tell me about the other tributes, she said, changing the subject before she could do something foolish. The ones who came before me. Where are they now? Kieran smiled, as if he understood exactly why she was deflecting. Would you like to meet them? The next morning, he took her to a village on the outskirts of Valdren. It was smaller than the city, nestled in a valley where the mountains blocked the worst of the winter winds. Smoke rose from cozy cottages, and children played in the streets, their laughter ringing through the crisp morning air. Some of the children were fully human. Others shifted between forms as they ran, tumbling over each other as wolves before springing back up as giggling boys and girls. This is Haven, Kieran explained. It was built for the tributes who chose to stay. Many of them married into the pack. Others preferred to live among their own kind. We gave them a home where they could decide for themselves. A woman emerged from one of the cottages, her gray hair pulled back in a neat braid. She was human, older than Lyra's mother would have been, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. When she saw Kieran, her face broke into a warm smile. "Your Majesty," she dipped into a curtsy, "you honor us with your visit." "The honor is mine, Elda." Kieran gestured to Lyra. "This is Lyra. She arrived 3 days ago." Elda's eyes softened with understanding. Another lamb thrown to the wolves. She reached out and took Lyra's hands in hers. "I was like you once, child. Terrified, convinced I was going to die. That was 40 years ago." She squeezed gently. "I have lived a full life here, raised children, buried a husband I loved more than breath. This kingdom became my home in ways my village never was." Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes. "You never wanted to go back?" "Go back to what? To people who threw me away like garbage?" Elda shook her head. "No, child. I found my family here, my true family, and you can too if you let yourself." They spent the day in Haven, meeting former tributes who had built lives Lyra could scarcely imagine. Healers and teachers and craftswomen, mothers and grandmothers and leaders of their community. Every single one of them had a story like hers. Every single one of them had found something better than the death they had been promised. By the time they returned to the palace, something had shifted inside Lyra's chest. The walls she had built around her heart, the ones that had kept her safe through years of loneliness and fear, were beginning to crumble. And the bond that tied her to Kieran was burning brighter than ever. 2 weeks after her arrival, Lyra stopped pretending. She had spent so long fighting the bond, so long convincing herself that what she felt for Kieran was gratitude or confusion or the simple relief of not being dead. But she could not lie to herself anymore. Not when her heart raced every time he walked into a room. Not when she found herself counting the hours until dinner, until she could sit across from him and listen to his voice. Not when she lay awake at night, her body aching for something she had never allowed herself to want. She was falling in love with him. Perhaps she already had. The realization terrified her more than the forest ever did. It was Kieran who finally broke through her remaining walls. He found her on the palace balcony one evening, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of crimson and gold, and the first stars were beginning to emerge from the gathering darkness. Lyra heard his footsteps behind her but did not turn, afraid of what he might see in her eyes. "You have been avoiding me," he said quietly. "I have not." "Lyra." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the thin fabric of her gown. "I know when someone is running. You have been doing it for 3 days." She closed her eyes. He was right, of course. She had been pulling away, making excuses to skip their dinners, retreating to her chambers whenever she heard him approaching. She had thought distance would help. She had thought if she could just stop seeing him, the feelings would fade. They had only grown stronger. "I am afraid," she admitted. The words came out barely louder than a whisper. "Everything is happening so fast. A month ago I was waiting to die. Now I am in a palace with a king who says I am his mate, and I do not know how to trust any of it." "What do you need?" Kieran's voice was gentle. "Tell me what you need, and I will give it to you. More time. More space. I told you once that I would never force you, and I meant it." Lyra turned to face him. The dying light caught his features, softening the harsh angles of his face, making his amber eyes glow like embers. He was beautiful, she realized, not just powerful or commanding, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. "What if I do not want more space?" she whispered. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, barely contained. "Then what do you want?" She did not answer with words. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. For a single heartbeat, he was completely still. Then his arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. His mouth was warm and demanding, his hands steady on her waist, and Lyra felt herself melting into him like snow under spring sun. The bond between them exploded with light and heat, flooding her veins with a warmth so intense she thought she might burst from the force of it. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Kieran pressed his forehead to hers. "I have wanted to do that since the moment I found you in that forest," he murmured, frozen and defiant, and so impossibly brave. "I was terrified," Lyra admitted. "I know, but you did not let it break you." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "You never let anything break you. That is why I love you." Her heart stopped. "You love me? I have loved you since before I knew your name." His voice was rough with emotion. "I looked at you standing in that clearing, ready to die with your head held high, and I knew. I knew you were the one I had been waiting for my entire life." Tears spilled down Lyra's cheeks. She had never been loved before. Not like this. Not with words that felt like vows and eyes that held nothing but truth. "I love you too," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried so hard to protect myself. But you made it impossible." Kieran laughed, a warm sound that vibrated through both of them. "Good. I have no intention of making anything easy for you, Lyra. Not when it comes to us." He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring her like she was something precious. And when he pulled back, his amber eyes were shining with a joy she had never seen before. "Stay with me," he said, "not as a guest, not as a tribute. Stay as my queen." Before Lyra could answer, a howl split the night air. It was not the howl of Kieran's wolves. This was something darker, something wrong. Kieran's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid with tension. "What is it?" Lyra asked. His jaw tightened. "Trouble. Your village has sent an envoy." His eyes darkened with fury. "And they are demanding your return." The envoy waited in the great hall. Lyra recognized him the moment she walked through the doors. Elder Cormac, the head of the village council, the man who had pushed her toward the forest with cold hands and colder eyes. He stood in the center of the hall now, flanked by 2 guards from her village, looking absurdly small beneath the vaulted ceilings of Kieran's palace. His gaze found her immediately, and something ugly flickered across his weathered face. "There she is," his voice echoed through the chamber. "The tribute who forgot her place." Kieran stepped forward, positioning himself between Lyra and the elder. The wolves of his court lined the walls, their eyes glowing in the torchlight, their bodies tense with barely restrained hostility. "You are in my kingdom, elder." Kieran's voice was deadly calm. "I suggest you remember your manners." Cormac's lip curled. "With respect, your majesty, the girl belongs to us. She was given as tribute according to the sacred treaty. You have no right to keep her." "The treaty grants me whatever tribute is sent." Kieran's amber eyes blazed with cold fire. "It says nothing about returning them. Lyra stays." "The treaty also requires the tribute to be sacrificed." Cormac pulled a scroll from his robes, unrolling it with theatrical flourish. "Devoured," it says here. "Consumed by the wolves. That is the price for our village's protection. If the tribute lives, the treaty is broken, and you owe us a century of unpaid debts." Lyra's blood ran cold. She looked at Kieran, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, and understood with sudden clarity what was happening. The elders did not want her back. They wanted leverage. They wanted to use her survival against the Alpha King himself. "That is not how the treaty works," Kieran said flatly, "and you know it." "Do I?" Cormac smiled, thin and vicious. "The exact wording is quite clear, your majesty. The tribute must be consumed. Your father interpreted that metaphorically, but the council has always maintained that the original intent was literal. If you wish to keep this girl alive, you will need to compensate us for our loss." "Compensate you?" Kieran's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You want to be paid for the girl you sent to die. We want what is owed to us. Cormac's eyes slid to Lyra, and the hatred in them made her stomach turn. Unless, of course, you would prefer to honor the treaty as written. Return the girl to us, and we will handle the matter ourselves. Lyra felt the room tilt beneath her feet. They wanted to kill her. After everything, after years of pretending the tributes were sacrificed to wolves, the elders wanted to murder her themselves just to prove a point. Touch her, Kieran said quietly, and I will burn your village to ash. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The wolves along the walls shifted restlessly, their growls building into a low, ominous chorus. Cormac's composure cracked for just a moment, fear flashing across his face before he smoothed it away. Threats will not change the law, Your Majesty. The Council has already sent word to the High Court of Alphas. If you refuse to honor the treaty, they will strip you of your title and your lands. He tucked the scroll back into his robes. You have 3 days to make your decision. Return the girl, or face the consequences. He turned and strode from the hall, his guards scrambling to keep up. The moment the doors closed behind him, Lyra's legs gave out. Kieran caught her before she hit the floor, sweeping her into his arms and carrying her to a nearby bench. Breathe, he murmured, his hand stroking her hair. Breathe, Lyra. I will not let them take you. They want me dead. The words came out broken, barely audible. My own people want me dead. They are not your people. His voice was fierce. They never were. Your people are here, in this palace, in this kingdom. You belong with me. But the High Court will hear the truth. Kieran cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. I have evidence of what the elders have done. Decades of tributes who survived, who can testify to the lies your village has spread. The treaty was never meant for slaughter. It was meant for integration, for bringing new blood into the packs. Your elders twisted it into something monstrous, and I will expose them for what they are. Lyra searched his face, desperate to believe him. And if the court does not listen? If they side with the elders? Something cold and ruthless flickered in Kieran's amber eyes. Then I will go to war, he said simply. I will tear down every village that sells its daughters and burn every elder who profits from their suffering. I will remake this entire world if that is what it takes to keep you safe. He meant it. She could see it in every line of his body, hear it in every word he spoke. He would burn everything for her, and that terrified her almost as much as the thought of losing him. Lyra made her decision on the second night. She lay awake in her chambers, staring at the ceiling while the fire crackled low in the hearth. Kieran had spent the day preparing his case for the High Court, gathering testimonies from former tributes, compiling evidence of the elders' corruption. He was so certain he could win, so certain that justice would prevail. But Lyra had grown up under Elder Cormac's rule. She knew how cunning he was, how ruthless. He had been manipulating the treaty for decades without consequence. He had allies on the High Court, wolves who benefited from the tribute system just as much as the village elders did. The idea that they would suddenly side with justice over profit was naive at best. And if Kieran lost, he would go to war. He would sacrifice his kingdom, his people, his life, all for her. A girl he had known for barely a month. A tribute who had stumbled into his world by accident and somehow become the center of it. She could not let that happen. The palace was quiet as she slipped from her chambers. She had memorized the guards' patrol routes over the past weeks, learned which corridors were empty at which hours. She moved through the shadows like a ghost, her heart breaking with every step. She found Elder Cormac in the guest quarters Kieran had reluctantly provided. He was awake, sitting by the fire with a glass of wine in his hand, as if he had been expecting her. When she stepped through the door, his thin lips curved into a smile. I knew you would come, he said. You always were predictable, Lyra. Too soft, too willing to sacrifice yourself for others. I will go with you. The words tasted like poison on her tongue. Leave Kieran alone. Drop your claim with the High Court, and I will return to the village without a fight. Cormac's smile widened. And why would I agree to that? The Alpha King has already threatened to expose us. Even if you come willingly, he will not stop. He will if I am already dead. The words hung in the air between them. Cormac's eyes flickered with something that might have been surprise. I will write him a letter, Lyra continued. Her voice was steady, even as her heart shattered. I will tell him I chose to leave, that I never loved him, that the bond meant nothing to me. She swallowed hard. By the time he realizes the truth, it will be too late. You will have what you want, and he will have no reason to pursue you. Cormac studied her for a long moment. Then he set down his wineglass and rose to his feet. You would die for him, he said slowly. You would let me kill you, just to spare him a war he would almost certainly win. I would die to spare his people the suffering that war would bring. Lyra lifted her chin, refusing to let him see her fear. I have seen what your cruelty costs. I will not let Kieran pay that price for me. Something flickered in Cormac's eyes. Not admiration exactly, something colder, more calculating. Very well, he said. We leave at dawn. Write your letter, little tribute. Make it convincing. He swept past her and out of the room, leaving Lyra alone with the weight of what she had just done. She wrote the letter with trembling hands. Every word was a lie. Every sentence carved another piece from her heart. She told Kieran that she had never truly loved him, that she had used him to escape her fate, nothing more. That she was returning to her village of her own free will, and he should forget she ever existed. She left it on his pillow while he slept, pressing one final kiss to his forehead before she walked away. The journey back to the village took 2 days. Cormac kept her bound in the back of a covered wagon, hidden from anyone who might question why the Alpha King's mate was being transported like cargo. Lyra did not fight. She did not speak. She simply sat in the darkness and let the bond in her chest scream with agony as the distance between her and Kieran grew. By the time they reached the village, she felt hollow, empty, like something essential had been carved out of her and left bleeding on the palace floor. Cormac dragged her from the wagon and threw her into the cellar beneath the council hall. It was cold and damp and utterly dark, and Lyra knew with terrible certainty that she would never leave it alive. The execution will be tomorrow, Cormac said through the bars. A public spectacle to remind the people what happens to tributes who forget their place. He smiled, cold and triumphant. Rest well, little girl. It is the last night you will ever see. The door slammed shut, and Lyra was alone. She curled into a ball on the frozen ground and finally let herself weep. Miles away, Kieran woke to find her letter on his pillow and felt his entire world collapse. Kieran did not believe a single word. He read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking, his wolf howling with rage inside his chest. The words were wrong. The tone was wrong. Everything about it felt like a lie written by someone who did not know Lyra at all. She loved him. He had seen it in her eyes, felt it in her kiss, heard it in her voice when she whispered the words against his skin. The bond between them was not something that could be faked or denied. It was soul deep, woven into the very fabric of their beings. She had not left because she stopped loving him. She had left because she loved him too much. He shifted before he reached the palace doors. His wolf form was massive, black as midnight, with eyes that burned like molten gold. He tore through the countryside at a speed that would have killed a lesser creature, his paws eating up the miles between Valdrin and the village that had dared to take his mate. Behind him, his pack followed, dozens of wolves responding to their alpha's call, their howls echoing through the night like a promise of vengeance. They reached the village at dawn. The execution had already begun. Lyra stood on a wooden platform in the center of the square, her hands bound behind her back, her thin gown stained with dirt from the cellar. Elder Cormac stood beside her, a ceremonial blade in his hand, delivering a speech about sacred duties and the price of defiance. The villagers watched in silence, their faces pale with fear. Kieran did not slow down. He crashed through the crowd like a hurricane made flesh, his wolves spreading out behind him to surround the square. Villagers screamed and scattered. The guards who tried to stop him were thrown aside like rag dolls, their weapons useless against the fury of an alpha king. He shifted mid-leap, landing on the platform in human form, naked and blood-spattered and utterly terrifying. Cormac stumbled backward, the ceremonial blade clattering from his trembling hands. "Your Majesty, this is not— you have no right—" "No right?" Kieran's voice was barely human, a growl that resonated with power. "You stole my mate. You planned to murder her in front of her own people. And you think I have no right?" He grabbed Cormac by the throat and lifted him off his feet. "Kieran!" Lyra's voice cut through the chaos, weak but steady. "Kieran, please, do not kill him." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression cracked. She was alive, bruised and exhausted and trembling, but alive. He dropped Cormac to the ground and crossed the platform in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face as if she might shatter at his touch. "You left me." The words came out broken. "You wrote that letter and you left. I was trying to protect you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I could not let you go to war for me. I could not let your people suffer because of what I am." "What you are is everything." He pressed his forehead to hers, his body shaking with the effort of holding himself together. "You are my mate, my heart, my soul. There is nothing I would not burn to keep you safe." "I know." She laughed through her tears. "That is exactly why I had to leave." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, not caring that they were surrounded by villagers and wolves and the elder who had tried to murder her. The bond between them roared back to life, flooding through them both like a tidal wave, and Lyra felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been dormant her entire life finally waking up. A cough interrupted them. Kieran pulled back, his arm wrapping protectively around Lyra as he turned to face the crowd. The villagers had gathered in a trembling mass, unsure whether to flee or kneel. Elder Cormac lay groaning on the platform, his face purple where Kieran's hand had gripped his throat. "This man is guilty of corruption, conspiracy, and attempted murder," Kieran announced, his voice carrying across the silent square. "For decades, he and his council have twisted a treaty of peace into a system of terror. They have sold innocent women into what they claimed was death, and they have profited from the fear of their own people." He gestured to the wolves surrounding the square. "But the tributes did not die. They lived. They built families and futures in my kingdom, while their villages believed they had been devoured." His amber eyes swept across the crowd. "You have been lied to. All of you. And today, those lies end." The former tributes of Haven stepped forward from among the wolves, women who had been sent to die and had instead found new lives. Some of the villagers gasped, recognizing daughters and sisters and friends they had mourned for years. "Mama," a young woman's voice rang out, trembling with disbelief. And then the weeping began. The reunions lasted for hours. Lyra watched from Kieran's arms as families found each other again, as daughters embraced mothers they had believed dead for decades, as the truth of what the elders had done finally sank into the hearts of every villager. There was grief mingled with the joy, anger mixed with relief. Years of lies were unraveling before their eyes, and the weight of it was almost too much to bear. Elder Cormac and his council were dragged away in chains, their protests falling on deaf ears. They would face trial before the High Court of Alphas, with dozens of surviving tributes ready to testify against them. Their corruption had been exposed, their power stripped away, and they would spend the rest of their lives paying for the suffering they had caused. When the chaos finally settled, Kieran led Lyra away from the crowd to a quiet spot at the edge of the village. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and for the first time since she had walked into the forest as a tribute, Lyra felt like she could truly breathe. "You should not have come for me," she said quietly. "I meant what I said. I could not let you risk everything for my sake." Kieran turned to face her, his amber eyes burning with intensity. "And I meant what I said. There is nothing I would not sacrifice to keep you safe. Not my kingdom, not my crown, not my life." He reached out and took her hands in his. "When I woke and found that letter, I thought my heart would stop. I thought I had lost you forever." The letter was a lie. Tears pricked at her eyes. "Every word of it. I have never loved anyone the way I love you, Kieran. I was just trying to protect you from yourself." "I do not need protection." He stepped closer, his hands sliding up to cup her face. "I need you, only you, for the rest of my life and whatever comes after." Lyra's breath caught as he lowered himself to one knee before her. "I was going to do this properly," he said, a faint smile crossing his face. "In the palace, with flowers and music and all the trappings of royalty. But I find I cannot wait another moment." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a simple band of silver set with a stone that shimmered like moonlight. "This belonged to my mother. She wore it until the day she died, and she told me to give it to the woman who captured my soul." Lyra's tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. "Lyra," Kieran continued, his voice rough with emotion, "you walked into my forest expecting death and found me instead. You challenged me, defied me, made me question everything I thought I knew about fate and love and what it means to be truly alive. I do not want to spend another day without you by my side." He held up the ring, and the dying sunlight caught the stone, making it glow like a captured star. "Will you marry me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my mate in every way that matters?" Lyra looked down at the man kneeling before her. The Alpha King, the ruler of the northern packs, the most powerful wolf in the realm, and beneath all of that, simply Kieran, the man who had wrapped his cloak around a frozen tribute and carried her home, the man who had given her choices when no one else ever had, the man who had torn through an army and crossed a kingdom to save her life. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Kieran's face split into a smile so bright it rivaled the setting sun. He slid the ring onto her finger, then surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed through her tears. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with all the passion and tenderness she had come to expect from him. The bond between them sang with joy, pulsing with a warmth that seemed to radiate from her very soul. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing in that clearing, and I will love you until the stars burn out and the world turns to dust." "And I love you," Lyra replied, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt, "more than I ever thought I was capable of loving anyone." Behind them, a howl rose into the evening air, then another and another, until the entire pack was singing their approval to the sky. The villagers who had gathered to watch joined in, their voices rising in a cheer that echoed off the mountains. Lyra laughed, burying her face in Kieran's chest as the sound washed over them. She had come to this place as a sacrifice. She had expected to die alone in the cold, forgotten by the world. Instead, she had found a king who loved her, a kingdom that welcomed her, and a future brighter than anything she had ever dared to imagine. 1 year later, the tribute system was abolished forever. Lyra stood on the balcony of the palace, watching as messengers rode out to every village in the realm carrying the news. The High Court of Alphas had ruled unanimously in Kieran's favor, declaring the practice of human tribute a corruption of ancient treaties and an affront to the laws of the Pack. Any elder who attempted to continue the tradition would face execution. It was over. After generations of fear and lies, it was finally over. Kieran's arms wrapped around her from behind, his hands coming to rest on the swell of her belly. She was 6 months along now, round and glowing with the life growing inside her. The healers said it would be a boy, a future alpha with his father's amber eyes and his mother's stubborn spirit. "You are thinking too hard," Kieran murmured against her hair. "I can hear your mind racing from across the room." Lyra smiled and leaned back into his warmth. "I am thinking about everything that has changed. A year ago, I was walking into a forest expecting to die. Now I am a queen, carrying the heir to the northern packs." She shook her head in wonder. "Sometimes it still does not feel real." "It is real." He turned her gently in his arms, his amber eyes soft with love. "You are real. Our son is real. And the future we are building together is more real than anything I have ever known." She rose onto her toes and kissed him, slow and sweet. The past year had been a whirlwind of change. Their wedding had been the grandest celebration the kingdom had ever seen, with wolves and humans gathering from every corner of the realm to witness their union. Lyra had worn a gown of silver and white, a crown of iron and moonstone resting on her brow, and when Kieran had spoken his vows, his voice had cracked with emotion. She had found her father in the crowd that day. He had traveled from the village to see her, his face aged with guilt and grief. He had wept when he saw her, begging for forgiveness he did not deserve. Lyra had given it anyway, not because he had earned it, but because carrying the weight of his betrayal had become too heavy. She had let it go, and in doing so, she had finally set herself free. Now she spent her days learning to be a queen, working alongside Kieran to reshape the kingdom into something better. The former tributes of Haven had become her closest advisors, women who understood what it meant to survive and rebuild. Together, they were creating a world where no girl would ever be sacrificed again. And on the night of the winter solstice, under the light of the full moon, Lyra shifted for the first time. It happened without warning, her body transforming in a rush of golden light. When she opened her eyes, she was standing on 4 legs, her fur the color of fresh snow, her senses exploding with 1,000 new sensations. Kieran shifted beside her, his black wolf pressing against her white one, and together they ran through the frozen forest where they had first met. The bond between them sang with perfect harmony, 2 souls finally complete. When they returned to the palace at dawn, Lyra curled against Kieran's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "My queen, my mate, my everything." She had been given to the wolves as tribute, a sacrifice meant to die in the cold and the dark. Instead, she had been carried home, and she had never looked back.